And welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, right here on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And today, a deep dive into all things California and how the California dream became a Golden State nightmare. We'll sit down with failed state author Chris Moritz and cover all of it. Here's President Trump recently laying out how California failed so much, so fast. Watch.
Are you going to cut funds in the sanctuary states, like for instance California, that keep supporting illegal immigration, and then these people work under
Yeah, we're
the
giving
table?
them a hard time.
And also, in a foreign policy
I
question.
mean, they don't have a governor in California. They have a man that wants to give away everything to people that nobody's seen before. If we didn't go into Los Angeles with the military, which did a fantastic job, but if we didn't go into Los Angeles, bringing in the National Guard, I would have brought the military if it was necessary, because you have to. We have the right to. That was another thing upheld by the Supreme Court. But if we didn't go in with the National Guard and be strong and tough, you wouldn't maybe have Los Angeles. It would be like the rest of California, the rest of Los Angeles. They lost 25,000 houses in a fire. They should have lost none. You know, I sent the water down. I had to break into their water supply because they just refused to do it. They're crazy. There's something wrong with them. They have plenty of water. They don't have droughts or anything. They have We let it come down from the Pacific Northwest. They routed all the water out into the Pacific Ocean for environmental reasons, okay? And now you have 25,000 houses, none of which would have burned down if you had the water. They didn't have water. They didn't have water for the fire pumps. They didn't have water in the sprinkler systems that people put in. So the answer is we're going to work with governors. We're going to work with radical left Democrats and Democrats, and we're going to make it good for everybody. We'll have to stop the crime in those, or in the case of the cities, I think I can say just about all cities with heavy crime are run by Democrats.
And much more coming up with our exclusive guest. But first, an important word from our sponsor for having the guts to support this program. And in the meantime, free speech is under attack, but Rumble refuses to back down. We have always believed in empowering independent voices, and now Rumble is taking it to the next level. We are excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. And it's more than a subscription. It is a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. So join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using promo code KG10. So just visit rumble.com/premium/KG10 and claim your discount today. Again, that's rumble.com/premium/KG10. Also, be sure to check out the good folks over at the 1775 Coffee Company. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 coffee is brewed to perfection. It is crafted with precision and built on patriotism. The farm to cup process means there is quality, authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single sourced. So why not? Try 1775 coffee today. Go to 1775coffee.com/KG for 15% off your first order. Joining me now, author of Failed State, A Portrait of California, Christopher Moritz. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Glad to be here.
Okay, well, I'm excited about your book. The title, Failed State, seems more relevant than ever. For many who still want to see California, like myself, I'm a native of California, of San Francisco, you know, as a land of innovation and business opportunity, Hollywood dreams, all of the above. What is the single most compelling piece of evidence you present that the Golden State has fundamentally broken its promise to protect its citizens?
Yeah, well, no, there you have it. To protect its citizens. Our entire system of government, going back long before the United States even, was based on the idea of a social contract in which we surrender certain rights in exchange for protection from the government that is supposed to have a monopoly on violence. And even when violence does occur on the citizens, there is an expectation of justice. That contract, that relationship has been severed in California over the course of 15 years of extraordinarily deadly legislative policies and feckless, dangerous leadership.
Yeah, and in your book, you analyze policies like, Proposition 47 and zero bail, which I'm, as a former prosecutor, deeply against. Can you draw a direct line for our audience, from the passage of these laws to the brazen, like smash and grab robberies and declining quality of life that really have now become viral symbols of California's decay.
Yeah. Well, this really began following a Supreme Court case called Brown v. Plata in 2010, in which the Supreme Court held that California state prisons were in violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment due to overcapacity. This then spurred, in coordination with a subversive movement coming out of places like Stanford Law School, criminal justice reform, a effort by the California, by Sacramento to address the so-called crisis of mass incarceration, which translated to a series of laws by which violent offenders were reclassified as non-violent offenders, released back into the county prisons and local jails, which could not handle that capacity, and then they were released into the public. So one law in particular called AB 109, which Kamala Harris sort of inaugurated as her when she was Attorney General, did this reclassification gimmick, which basically meant that the last crime for which you were charged determined whether you were nonviolent or not.
Right.
You could have an entire criminal history of violence and still be under that that reclassification and get into this, new kind of situation with the county jails. And 60% of those reclassified prisoners were rearrested in 3 years, and 41% were convicted. On the smash and grabs and the retail theft, which is associated with Prop 47, which reduced theft under $950 to a misdemeanor, where it had been a felony. Over the course of the period of 2014 to effectively 2022-23, when the date of my book was comprised, we have a 114% increase in retail theft.
Unbelievable.
In the United States, it's $100 billion loss. I mean, in California, it's in the tens of billions, but this is a huge organized crime effort. And there's many reasons for why organized crime got into it. But the fact is, Kimberly, like you talk about quality of life, what kind of quality of life is it in the Golden State when you go to CVS and toothpaste is locked behind a plastic, protector? Like that's is not normal. That is not normal. And something very abnormal has happened in this state. And it happened to me. In 2023, I was home invaded 2 nights in a row by an MS-13 illegal alien dreamer who had been deported by President Trump in 2018 and who came back into the United States illegally under the Biden invasion in 2021. He went on a crime spree across Southern California, committed dozens of these kinds of home invasion or hot prowl burglaries. And ultimately, he was only sentenced to 1 count of one of these crimes in Ventura County, because in Los Angeles, property crimes during that time under George Gascon, the former DA, were not considered a threat. So he got 2 years in jail and a $300 fine.
It's just
and he
outrageous.
threatened to murder police officers, by the way, with his stolen loaded gun while he was in interrogation.
It's just absolutely insane. And I can't believe, so sorry you had to go through all that, but it is a very stark and telling example of the extent of the problem in California, and quite frankly, in, blue states and municipalities that have just essentially recklessly abandoned its citizens and have no eye towards property protection, personal protection, and decreasing crime. And, beyond petty and property crime, your research delves into organized crime, and you touched on that a bit. How have the Mexican cartels and sophisticated street gangs exploited California's criminal justice reforms, quite frankly, as a means to an end to expand their operations, particularly concerning fentanyl trafficking and human trafficking?
60% of fentanyl that enters the United States comes through California on the southern border. The Mexican drug cartels have effectively have a monopoly position on organized crime in the state of California, and that seems to have happened sometime in the late 2000s when Mexican drug cartels pushed legacy black gangs, in particular, like the Bloods and the Crips, who used to run the dope trade. They pushed them out of narcotics distribution with the threat of, quote, cutting your head off if we catch you selling dope that is not sanctioned, and they meant it. And so they effectively executed a hostile takeover of the entire narcotics trade in the state. Now, that has many ancillary crimes to it, so it expands their empire. But what is so interesting about this is that the cartels have a kind of ethno suzerainty over crime in the state. And the way I frame that is because all Latino gangs in the state of California effectively pay a kind of tribute and homage to a prison gang called the Mexican Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
Mexican Mafia, in turn, approves hits, runs like narcotics deals, all of this inside of prison. And the Mexican Mafia ultimately reports to cartel leadership. So if we follow that syllogism, we have cartels, Mexican Mafia, and all Latino gangs, even ones that have internecine feuds, they still all report to this hierarchy. It's very unique. It does not happen in other echelons of organized crime in the state. So it has magnified and acted as a force multiplier of violent crime in the state, of drugs, fentanyl. We have, of course, 30% of the country's homeless in our state, 75,000 in Los Angeles alone. The fentanyl issue has become out of control. You see it everywhere, and so that's kind of the dynamic. But what makes it even more insidious is that as these legacy American like black gangs were pushed out of dope, they had to find new criminal verticals to support their revenue. So they move into residential burglaries. They move into the smash and grabs. They move into the attacks on Nordstroms and all of that we see. Those are not spontaneous reactions of poor, desperate people. They are organized crime.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. You mentioned the Mexican Mafia because there was also a gang prosecutor in Los Angeles, and they run a very serious, like notorious, prison gang operation as well that has like far-reaching tentacles. And it's just interesting what you said about how the Latin gangs and Mexican Mafia and all that moved in to this space, into this area. I mean, what do you think is the kind of the solution of how do you combat and attack a problem like this?
I mean, we may be at a point, and this is why the title of my book is Failed State. We may be at a point that there is very little that can be done to repair because so much damage has been baked in. But I think, of course, like with respect to the sort of cross-border organized crime, obviously it has to start with federal and state cooperation on ending the sanctuary cities, because that has a magnifying effect on the ability of these foreign gangs to operate. We have to obviously seal the border, which the president has done an enormously effective job at. So these are all great kind of steps towards that. But I think that you have to address the prison issue. How is it that prisoners are able to control organized crime in the state? It doesn't make any sense. No. So that has to stop. And I think if that is cut off, by the way, there's 30,000 gang members in California state prisons, 200,000 gang members in the state of California. It's more than our National Guard. So we have to first strike the snake's head, which is the Mexican Mafia and these prison overlords.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, I know. I mean, I prosecuted, the dog mauling case that happened in San Francisco, and that involved the Aryan Brotherhood. And the Aryan Brotherhood somehow was involved with Mexican Mafia, all within the prison system, selling, dogs to guard methamphetamine labs. that the Mexican mafia was running those down in Riverside and Southern California. I mean, the whole thing is so unbelievable, and it's allowed to operate like a really serious criminal business enterprise from within our penitentiaries.
Yeah.
And these are some people that were in the SHU, in the secure housing unit, that were, at Pelican Bay. They put a contract out on me to have me killed, charming individuals. But, this is what we're dealing with. How is this allowed?
Do you have any insight? I truly, like, how this is even possible as a process, how they can operate to this extent. I don't understand it. I imagine, based on your experience, you must have some thoughts on how it is actually effectuated, but it is very, very just discontinent with any kind of rational understanding of prisons.
Yeah, I mean, they do special communications called kites that they send out with like different codes and this and that to the people on the outside. And it's just like, it's a whole thing. Like, it's unbelievable how they've evolved into this, and they still have such a measure of success. But we could talk about that all day. But I also want to talk about, because we are coming into the heart of wildfire season, and this is a crisis of governance as well. How has, and people ask themselves, the same political leadership failing on its crime policies also failed to actually manage forests and protect communities from what have become annual catastrophic fires that require federal government, intervention.
Yeah, it's a great question. Because ultimately the answer to that is that in a one-party state where there is complete hegemony over all decision making and no competition or accountability, you can continuously fail up without consequence. And that is what happens. That's how someone like Kamala Harris, a very mediocre person, is able to rise to the level she was, she attained. And so I think that on this wildfire issue, again, that there is a lack of accountability that is baked into the system. I truly was expecting some kind of reform following the Palisades fire. I was a block away from the evacuation zone. It was the most awful thing I've ever seen. And yet there seems to be a dulled reaction to it, even in the city. People, it's as if it never happened. Like for the people in the Palisades, they're scarred for life. And we can, whether there will ultimately be accountability to the LA Department of Water and Power executive who presided over the Santa Ynez Reservoir in the Palisades that was dry for like 9 months prior to the fire. And we know that there was heavy winds coming, and complete dereliction of duty of Mayor Bass, who is a complete joke and a clown. But again, she's part of this. She's a symbol of the state's complete collapse. It takes 7 years to get approved in the state of California to do a controlled burn. That is the essence of fire management. But because we have things like the California Coastal Commission and many other bureaucracies related to sort of green policies, which, by the way, is embedded with corruption and consultants that are connected and corrupt, just like we've seen with the high-speed rail. It's all part of the same systematic decay. That's why nothing ever changes, and that's why people are getting burned alive every autumn. It's just unbelievable. And by the way, during the fire, a lot of people don't realize this, the gangs moved into the neighborhoods that were evacuated. 150 were chased out of my neighborhood. They were going up and down the streets looking for empty houses, terrorizing people. 43 arrests, very little coverage of that. And again, like, this is the perfect illustration of how, when you have a state that does not take responsibility and does not have structures in place to predict these kinds of disasters, and also control the elements of crime that have been baking and brewing for all these years, we are going to have this over and over again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so sad. And that's what they do. They move in, just no morality, no regard for human life. or personal property. There's something symbolic, about Rick Caruso's Palisades Village being the only structure still standing and in good form on Sunset Boulevard, while like everything else around it was totally destroyed. How do you see it?
I mean, Caruso had extensive irrigation on that property, and it's kind of remarkable because it's right next to an area. It was called the ABCs, part of the Palisades, and it was completely leveled, right? And the Rick Caruso property is absolutely adjacent to it and survived when very few buildings did. So I think it obviously reflects a kind of anticipation of this sort of disaster, and that's exactly the kind of anticipation that is completely lacking in a state where there's no accountability.
Right, and where there's no leadership, is a leadership vacuum, and the defectless way in which they conduct themselves. And I mean, Karen Bass is just absolutely grotesquely incompetent. Okay?
Yes.
And
Yes.
just has no clue, no anticipation, no care, just a complete lunatic. And it's just sad because how do people like this that are so woefully incompetent, okay, get in such an important position in a state that once was like a shining example of a prosperous economy and a very desirable place to live?
I think a big part of the reason we have this political hegemony by the Democratic Party in the state of California was a product of demographic engineering going back to the 1990s, when policies were put in place that encouraged an influx of kind of low-wage illegal aliens and the like. And that transformed the state dramatically to the point today we have a 27% foreign-born population, the highest possibly in North America, certainly in the United States. And 20% of California K through 12 students cannot speak English, right? So we have, meanwhile, during the last 10 years, like 8 million Californians, middle class, working family types have moved out of the states. You have a shrinking tax base. You have a growing poverty base. We're 31% poverty rate in California. It's the highest in the nation, and a demographic displacement. So this has resulted in a kind of cancerous political culture that does not reflect firstly, the greatness and potential of California, but obviously the needs of its citizens.
Mm-hmm. And you document a mass exodus of business and middle-class families from California. And Nordstrom, who you mentioned earlier, just announced that they're closing their Santa Monica store. You know, what does the state's future look like if it's left with only the very rich and the very poor with no in-between?
Right. I mean, I think that's where we are headed. It is remarkable. I live in Santa Monica, and the empty storefronts on sort of the kind of formerly, Main Street, high street shopping areas is absolutely shocking, juxtaposed to the homeless favela type encampments that have spurred all over the West Side. So I think that we are going to look at a situation where, for instance, as public law enforcement becomes more and more strained, as it has, the wealthy are actually adopting in huge numbers, more than anywhere else in the United States, private security. So you are effectively having a two-system economy that resembles, let's say, a Latin American, type political economy, where you have a small elite and a huge underclass, and it's fundamentally and unstable, and that's why those countries have such volatility and just continual perennial violence and problems, and that's what California is becoming. That is why it is a failed state.
And you see all this, right? We know what it used to be. The juxtaposition is so stark, the contrast, but yet voters in LA County keep voting for it. It's deep blue. It's the larger point that you've kind of, been touching on and making, is California salvageable? Are we witnessing a permanent, decline? And what is it going to take? I mean, we see the president trying to help and get involved. And when you compare it to the measure of, red states with strong governance and strong protection and focus on public safety and property protection, and a flourishing economy, it's like, why do they do it? Maybe just only the lunatics are left behind and they keep voting for these people? Like, what kind of weirdness is this?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happened. I think that with this exodus of manufacturing, there's been 700,000 manufacturing jobs lost since like 2000. As I said, 8.5 million people left over the last 10 years. There's been a net loss of like over 1 million. And I think you are increasingly left with a dependent underclass, which received the benefits from the state. In fact, Governor Newsom has even proposed and put in place health care for illegal aliens at the cost of $13 billion when we have a $68 billion budget deficit. So you have that kind of incentivizing. And then you have, again, this protected elite that don't feel the consequences of anything we're talking about.
That's
So
the
what
point.
difference does it make?
You're right. They don't feel any of the consequences because they have so much money and they think it's like, okay, I don't understand like the rationale. How is it fair or okay to say, let everybody come in, let's have a porous border, let's just have, massive illegal immigration into this country, then let's pay for everything while hardworking American citizens don't have anybody paying for all their things. Like, why is it okay to put the onus and the burden on people who are respecting due process, respecting the laws of this country?
Yeah, why do so many institutions, endowments, Stanford, the Arnold Foundation, the Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, obviously George Soros, why did they put $100 million into criminal justice reform DAs who dismantled the justice system? Mm-hmm. Like, why? What is the motivation? Because in my view, those kinds of directives are so demonstrably negligent. They are really grossly negligent, as are the laws that behind them that we discuss. So what's the motivation? I don't know. I think that you could make a lot of different, you could pin a lot of different ulterior motives even to some of these policies. Like, is there an attempt to try and, let's say, destabilize real estate prices in downtown areas? We just don't know. But these moneyed interests are backing and have perpetuated this system, and it has resulted in a state that is unrecognizable. So
it's really true. That's a powerful title, failed state. I mean, it really, lays it all out there. It's exactly what's going on. It's just awful to see. And, I was born and raised in, San Francisco. My father came to the American dream, from Ireland. He came here the right way, legally applying, enlisting in the military, doing all of that. And, I don't, look, I know we're a nation of immigrants, but like, why should you get to cut the line and somebody else, does it the right way? I mean, it's just so grotesquely unfair. Like, it's just, it's thumbing the nose, at due process and the laws of our country.
Well, I think for the political elite in California, they want that kind of influx because it provides them a continual base of power forever.
Right. Oh, it's very purposeful and intentional.
There's no other reason.
No, 1,000%. It's like an occupation of, the country for political purposes and have, more voters. And then go ahead, whoever wants to, just vote. Just doesn't matter. It's crazy to me. But your book's fantastic, and I'm glad you took the time to do it. I don't want to give up on California, but this is very frustrating. It's just, and then they expect the federal government to bail them out on all these poor decisions, which is just, it's like poor parenting. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like giving a reckless teenager your checkbook or your credit card and saying, hey, go nuts. But where can people go and follow you, buy your book, all of the above?
Thank you. Well, you can follow me on X at Chris G. Moritz. And then my book is available on Amazon for hardcover, now audiobook and Kindle. So lots of options.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for being on the program. I really enjoyed the time we spent together. So then your next book, let's see what happens if California makes a comeback, the comeback
I hope
kid.
so. I hope so. We deserve.
I hope so too. I hope so too. All right. Well, keep an eye on everything. And thank you for being on the program. We'd love to have you back again.
Delighted. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on this important episode. Please be sure to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the very latest breaking news coverage. And don't miss Don Jr.'s big show at 6 p.m. Eastern. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll look forward to talking to you again very soon. God bless.